Well, major changes are looming for the forestry sector as the deluge of raw log exports fades amid dwindling supplies and demands increasing from the building industry and other users. An industry report by investment house Forsyth Barr suggests the mainstay of the industry, log exports, will peak and drop by more than a third within a decade. Business reporter Nona Peltier has this report.
Report author Andy Boley says the multi-billion-dollar log trade is set to decrease as the fall in planting from the boom of 20 or more years ago results in fewer trees to harvest and sell. But he says rising demand from other uses, such as carbon farming, industrial heating and biomass fuels, will beat export logs.
Over the longer term, if carbon prices stay high, will attract new investment into forestry. Because of the cash flow benefits, particularly for the first, say, 15, 16 years of a forestry development from the capture of that carbon. So forestry becomes a more interesting investment.
The government is keen to push the industry away from log exports to more domestic processing and higher value processed products. The chair of Wood Processors and Manufacturers Association, Brian Stanley, says that's going to need a lot of investment and changes in industry practices.
Industry's going flat out gangbusters at the moment because of the building boom, but the building booms don't last forever. And when they flatten out, we're going to be back to where we were with surplus timber and probably some difficulty in getting rid of it offshore. The other thing that, of course, that you need to have to encourage investment down here is long-term log supply contracts. And that's the other issue that sawmills face. They can only get short-term log supply contracts, and nobody is going to invest $15 to $20 million, or probably more, up to $60 million in a state-of-the-art sawmill, unless they've got guaranteed supply contracts.
Brian Stanley says the industry will also need government help to compete with heavily subsidised foreign competitors.
For argument's sake, rapid depreciation on if you build a new sawmill. Like if you build a new sawmill over in the United States, it's written off in 12 months. You build a new sawmill in New Zealand, it gets written off over 10 or 15 years.
In the short term at least, the commercial and export advantage lies with small forest owners who provide a significant proportion of the export volumes. But as Forest Owners Association Chief Executive Phil Taylor notes, that could change quickly.
Typically, the small forest owners have one opportunity in, say, 28 to 30 years to optimise the return on their investment. So they are very sensitive to what's happening out in the market, and they have the ability to either to harvest or stop harvesting at very short notice. Whereas the large-scale forest owners typically have production capacity which they wish to maintain, and they have all sorts of cash flow requirements.
The emerging challenge to the established log trade is using forests as carbon sinks, which are the basis for increasingly lucrative carbon credits needed by polluters. Phil Taylor says about 14% of forests are covered by the emissions trading scheme, and so the cash attraction is likely to make little difference in the short to medium term.